Welcome to Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. I already did a video talking about Oregon's Measure 114, but I never got around to going over the text, impact, and future of this measure for firearms owners. So let's cover that today. Here you can see how this measure that goes on for 12 pages was abbreviated for the ballot and how Oregonians saw it on voting day and all the preceding days where they voted. It says a yes vote will require background checks, safety training, fee for permit to acquire firearms, state police maintain new permit/firearm database, criminally prohibits certain magazines, exceptions. Notice the trick they pull here in constructing the ballot measure text. Yes vote requires background check. It is true that under no it says retains current law, seller transferor must request criminal background check, but there is zero reason to mention something that does not change with the measure, unless you are trying to trick voters. Background checks have a lot of support, and putting it first thing and under yes, which is the first thing that will be read, will easily garner more support from people who do not know the current law and do not read the full text. Mention of background checks should have been omitted entirely. But let's get to the changes the measure itself makes, since this brief description is relatively accurate, but obviously does not go into any detail. The first relevant section after a long, erroneous, and frankly irrelevant justification-filled preamble, is it really a worry that gun sales have increased? Is the permit to purchase process. You will be required to get a permit before you can purchase any firearm, which you must purchase, and I say purchase here since there is of course a permit fee of up to $65, because if you are too poor, you are not worthy of defending yourself, I guess. Purchased through your local police chief or county sheriff. You are qualified for the permit if you are not already prohibited from purchasing a firearm, which would already be covered under the background check, not already subject to a red flag law, and do not, quote, present reasonable grounds for a permit agent, aka the cops, to conclude that the applicant has been or is reasonably likely to be a danger to self or others or to the community at large, end quote. Let's break that one down for a moment. This is completely subjective. You can easily have someone who can deny everyone. The people who proposed this law probably think they reasonably believe that everybody poses a risk and no one should have any firearms at all. So why couldn't a police officer think the same thing? Permit denied. Also, even if you have someone who is quote-unquote reasonable in a traditional sense, the text reads, has been a danger to self, others, etc. So, were you a depressed teen who thought about suicide? Goodbye fundamental right to self-protection, because at one point you were a danger to yourself. Permit denied. I guess Oregon wants people to know that you should not seek any mental health services, and also does not believe that anyone can reform or change, or that can result in a permanent forfeiture of rights. I certainly hope you didn't have a temper as a youngster and got in any fistfights. That's dangerous. Permit denied. You must also produce proof that you have completed a firearms safety course, which must include review of laws in place, review of safe storage laws, prevention of abuse or misuse of firearms, including going over the impact of homicide and suicide on families, communities, and the countries as a whole? What? And an in-person demonstration of the ability to lock, load, unload, and store a firearm in front of an instructor. I hope you don't fumble with that lock. I can do it. All right, I got it. It's fine. It's not locking. I got permit denied. The application needs to be verified with a government-issued ID with a picture, which I have it on good authority is too difficult to obtain for purposes of, say, voting. The application also needs a physical description, photograph, and fingerprinting done to be complete. And if you fail the background check, they report you to the authorities, which are also themselves. Interestingly, one of the people they report to is the Psychiatric Security Review Board, which apparently oversees people who successfully mounted an insanity defense in court. So no worries, the Joker can't get a firearm in Oregon. Permit denied. That may actually not be a bad idea, the Joker specifically. And they give themselves the generous time frame of up to 30 days to issue the permit, and government always gets things done timely, of course. These permits are valid for 5 years, and they will use this information to establish an electronic database of permit holders. Don't worry though, you can renew the permit and do not have to get fingerprints done when you renew it, as long as your local law enforcement can find them and didn't throw them out or delete them, and you can only be charged up to $50 for renewals. There is an appeal process if you are denied a permit, so no worries if you do encounter an unreasonable law enforcement agent. You just need to pay some Peasley court fees, and then you can be heard and possibly, not likely, be able to exercise your fundamental right. Also, they can seize your hard-earned permit if you are arrested for a crime which could be disqualifying, but they will give it back to you if you are not charged with said crime. Oh, and remember that electronic database of permits. Well, when you purchase a firearm, the dealer needs to let law enforcement know, and they add that firearm to the database under your name, so you are listed along with all the other firearms you purchased with that permit, and zero stipulations on this data expiring, though it does state that the police department may develop a system to remove firearms when there is proof that it has been sold. And I'm sure this data will never be leaked to the public, as something like that has never, ever happened before. Oh, wait. Also, there's no way a database tracking all firearms purchases could ever later to be used for something like confiscation, so don't you worry your little head. You may think the permit settles it, but no, this measure changes the law so that even if you produce your permit, you must receive a positive approval when a background check is run if you are trying to purchase a firearm. Current law states that if a dealer does not hear anything back by close of next business day when running a background check, they can still sell you the firearm, but now you need to receive that positive answer, and if they don't tell you in time or within a few days, then you know what, you're just having to wait. These same rules apply if you are doing a private transfer, which has already required you to go through a licensed dealer, and the same thing for purchasing firearms from a gun show. And those are all the major changes to the law in regards to the purchase of firearms. Onto the magazine restrictions. So-called large capacity magazines are illegal to possess, manufacture, use, import, sell, or transfer except under certain conditions. They define a large capacity magazine as one that holds more than 10 rounds or that can be readily restored to accept more than 10 rounds. Not ambiguous at all, but they do not count .22 caliber tubes or tubes in lever action rifles because those can't kill people or be used quickly. They allow the manufacture of large capacity magazines for armed forces or law enforcement because of course they cannot be without, as long as they put a large stamp of some kind indicating that they were manufactured after this measure was put into place, so that if a civilian possesses the same thing the government can possess, they will go to jail with a Class A misdemeanor, which can put you in jail as long as 1 year, and they can also add on a fine of $6,250 on top of that for an extra twist of the knife. There is an exception. Possession of these magazines is still legal if you owned them before this measure takes effect, which is why they are flying off the shelves currently and why firearms companies are prioritizing shipping magazines to Oregon at the moment. Plus, no one else will be putting these stamps or dates on the magazine, so unless there's a new generation PMAG that comes out next year or something, it's going to be kind of hard to prove that you did not have one beforehand. However, the grandfathered magazines are all restricted as follows. You owned it beforehand, you obtained this after the death of a former owner who was in legal possession, and even then you can only have them on your own property, at a gunsmith or gun shop for repair, at a public or private range, while in a firearms competition, for display in an educational project that has been approved by law enforcement, and in a vehicle while transporting magazines between the above locations as long as the magazine is locked and in a separate container from the firearm during transit. And they finish off this measure by saying, hey, if the judicial system finds Measure 114 or parts of it to be unconstitutional, just this nonsense that we've added that they find invalid will be removed, and the other heavy restrictions that were already put in place prior or with this measure are still valid. I get the feeling that they aren't quite confident that these restrictions are legal. It's almost like they are predicting that this will get struck down in court like the recent New York gun control laws, which is always nice. Don't you love it when politicians enact something they think is illegal because, in all likelihood, they can keep it in place for several years while the courts work it out, touting it as a political win to their supporters. And that's what I think will be the final destination for these Oregon gun control restrictions, as they are undeniably far stricter than historic gun laws at the founding and effectively make things illegal that were just decided with the Bruin decision. And as of this video, at least one lawsuit has already been filed trying to stop the implementation of this measure. Let's hope they succeed and Oregonians never have to actually endure these absurd restrictions. I think it is worth noting that the supporters of this measure spent in excess of $2.3 million campaigning for this measure, mostly from out-of-state gun control advocates, while the opposition only spent a tad over $130,000, and the vote was extremely close. Pro-gun people really need to rally around oppositions to measures like these when they are on the ballot or through politicians, instead of relying on the courts. A victory preventing an implementation is way better than a judicial victory, because even if you get a judicial victory, and that's a big if, clearly politicians will enact something else illegal because they just can regardless. Anyways, that's all I have for today about Measure 114, and I hope you enjoyed learning about the wonders of governmental law. Please give this video a like and hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Any and all support helps out the channel. Also, I have an Amazon associate account, which I stopped mentioning for some reason, and I need some people to buy something from it or they're going to kick me out. Bezos is harsh. So check out that link in the description. Do some Black Friday shopping or something. And if you want more content on Measure 114, check out my last video, which went over some reactions to the measure by supporters. It's a fun little video as far as ridiculing idiots go. I am Gary Gunderson, and thanks for watching.